Yeah.
You know that have 10 minutes to present, right?
We are supposed to have 10 minutes. Yeah, but I know.
No, you have 10 minutes.
Yeah.
We are starting late then.
Yeah, I know, no. Can you start?
Yes.
Okay. So, good morning, Nicolas. Good morning, professors. My research study is regarding multi-level class strategy and secondary children EFL students' writing proficiency levels. Well, the notion of my project was based on different observation of a group of secondary EFL Chilean students composed by 37 students in the private school Alcántara de la Cordillera in Florida. During these observations, the students presented a certain kind of behavior regarding the interactional patterns of writing tasks, completing this task in a joint manner that were individual. When students were asked about this behavior, they answered that completing this task in a joint manner was easier than completing individually. The question in my project were the following. In this case, the first one is the main question. What is the effect of the application of individualization as a multi-level class strategy on secondary EFL children learners' writing proficiency levels? The built-on questions are: is the individualization of tasks a useful strategy for assessing secondary children multi-level classrooms? And is the application of individualization a feasible strategy for assessing EFL multi-level students, considering contextual elements such as time constraints and the number of students per class? In terms of objectives, my objectives are to determine the possible effect of the application of certain multi-level class strategies on secondary EFL children learners' writing proficiency levels. The specific objectives to identify and measure secondary EFL children learners' proficiency and to measure and compare the level of writing proficiency after applying the individualization strategy. The assumption of this project was that individualization could be a factor for improving the levels of proficiency of students. In this case, by applying this strategy, the teacher can approach the entire classroom by considering different elements such as interest, age, gender, learning styles, etc. Also, this project was expected to contribute to the field of education by suggesting new strategies for approaching multi-level classrooms, as well as suggesting new strategies for improving levels of proficiency in a homogeneous manner. Well, the theoretical framework presents different authors of the field of education, as you can see. The main concepts of this framework are multi-level classroom, adaptation of tasks, proficiency, writing, and task. In this case, a multi-level classroom, according to Hess 2001, can be defined as a heterogeneous group in which all learners have different characteristics, such as learning styles, interests, aptitude, etc. One way to approach this kind of classroom is to adapt the task, is through the adaptation of task. Through this adaptation, the teacher is able to approach the level of task to a closer level for students, according to their level. In this case, you can personalize or you can individualize a task. In the case of personalization, you can adapt the task according to the interests of students. On the other hand, the individualization, you can adapt the task by allowing students to approach the task into different and several ways, according to their levels. Also, both Dyno and Bay in 2010 suggest that one methodological benefit of this is that through individualization, the teacher can get the necessary information for changing the intensity of tasks according to the level of students. On the other hand, proficiency can be defined according to the Council of Europe in the Common Framework for Reference as the aptitude of using language and developing skills for communicating effectively. Also, the government of Chile states that you can develop this proficiency through different communicative instances in which the language is used. Following this notion, the proficiency can be divided into 6 categories called the levels of proficiency. The levels of proficiency in this case are A1 and A2, considered as basic, B1 and B2 considered as independent, C1 and C2 considered as proficient. Writing, on the other hand, can be defined as the language of the use of language in a written form for communicative purposes. Also, Brown states that writing can be defined as the representation, the graphic representation of spoken language with rhetorical conventions. Task, on the other hand, can be defined as a work that must be done, and also the Council of Europe states that a task can be defined as a work which involves language use, or use of language, sorry. In this case, as you can see here, we have the conceptual definition that I already defined to you, and the operationalized definition. In this case, a multi-level classroom is the setting where the project was to be developed. The individualization was the strategy reflecting on 2 workshops to apply to the experimental group. Writing proficiency levels is were the levels elicited from students by the application of pre- and post-test, and the task was the manipulated variable or the independent variable. No, the dependent variable, sorry. In this case, the subject who participated in this project, as I already mentioned, corresponds to a group of 37 students aged between 16 and 17 years old. But for the specific purposes of this project, only 2 groups of 4 students were participating as the experimental and control group. Through this way, it was possible to determine that the effect found in this project was regarding the application of the strategy and not for the natural process of learning. Also, this project addressed to a social critical paradigm due to the purpose of solving certain problem in a social context. In this case, is the classroom. Also addressed to a mixed approach due to understand and go in deep a certain phenomenon in a natural context. In this case, is the interactional pattern and the level of proficiency, but also by using materials that its purpose is to generalize data. In the case of the pre- and post-tests that were based on standardized tests. Also, this project addressed to an action research paradigm, and in this case, also addressed a quasi-experimental design due to the manipulation of variables into groups that they were not chosen randomly. In this case, these groups were not chosen randomly due to the availability of the school and the availability for access to the research. In this case, it was me. According to Fernandez and Batista, the steps of the action research were the following. First, the identification of the problem. In this case, I identified by observing the thing, the phenomena, and in this case, the phenomenon was the change of the interactional pattern. Then, after I identified the problem, I formulated some plans. In this case, I formulated 2 lesson plans based on the strategy of individualization. Then I applied these workshops, and then I evaluated the results. In this case, I evaluated the results with an assessment rubric that I'm going to explain later. Then, after the evaluation, I created some feedback for a new diagnosis and a reflection after that. Okay, the procedure was the following. After dividing the 2 groups into experimental and control group, and applied a pretest based on the PET section. Then, I applied 2 workshops based on the individualization strategy. The application of the pretest was to determine a baseline regarding the levels of proficiency of students. And after applying the workshops, I applied a post-test in order to compare the results with the baseline, in order to find any difference. The material that I used in this case was a pre and post test that was mentioned before. Was based on the PEC section, the rating 1 and 2 of the PEC section. These tests were based on this standardized test because it was stated that a student can accomplish their level at level B1. So this standard test measured at this level. And on the other hand, this standard test works with the same definition of the same standards than the Council of Europe. That was the same definition that I was working with. And I used lesson plans in order to apply and planning the application of the strategy of individualization. Well, the analysis technique that I proposed was based on the creation of an assessment rubric based on the indicators of the preliminary English test and the national curriculums. After getting the results of both tests, of pre and post, I assessed these results according to the indicators of the government of Chile and the Common European Framework. So, in this case, after assessing these things, I compared it in order to find any difference between both results. Okay, the consideration of the trustworthiness corresponds to these points. First, content validity. According to Fernandez and Batista, content validity refers that an instrument can be valid if it's dominates a specific content that is measurable. In this case, I used the preliminary English test which specializes in measure the level of proficiency of students, so can be valid to according to this point. On the other hand, construct validity refers, according to Fernandez and Batista, refers that it can be valid, this instrument, if it represents a measurable context that is reviewed in literature. In this case, this test and also my pre-test, my pros and pre-test, were supported by the Council of Europe in the Common European Framework. So as you can see, it's supported by literature. And in terms of reliability, these tests are supported by different organizations such as the Council of Europe, so it's reliable, can be considered as reliable. And objectivity is a standardized test, so it's not possible to be approached by, by things that are, by subjective things. That is subjective, sorry. Okay, in terms of the expected outcomes, of course it was expected that individualization could be a factor for improving things. So it was expected that the experimental group could present any difference between the control and the experimental. In terms of limitation, there was time constraint and evaluation of students in the limitations. In terms of time constraint, it was not possible to create more workshops in order to ensure the application of the strategy. And also, it was not possible for because of time constraints to validate externally my materials. In this case, it was not possible to validate my instruments by an expert judgment. So it was not possible because of time constraints. And on the other hand, it was not possible to, I don't know if it's not possible, but I realized that students, during the process of observation, students presented an imbalance between the communicative function and the grammatical use. So it was not possible to categorize the level of proficiency of students into just one category, because students was was, I don't know, was using a great balance of the communicative purposes or the grammatical structures, but it didn't accomplish the communicative purpose. So that is a limitation for further research. And here are the reference that I used, that I presented in my presentation, but I have more in my project, of course. And that is my presentation.
Thank you.
I have a very